Hello and welcome back. So this is part 2 of Soup to Nuts, Planning and Executing an SCA Feast. We're going to talk primarily about developing the menu for the next 30 to 40 minutes, and then we will have time for questions. Again, this is about me. I'm going to skip over this because I talked about it in the first part of this class, but if you're taking the second part, here's my wiki, go read about it. So we are now in, see, with the arrow, we are now in part 2. Finding and choosing sources for recipes, testing the recipes so that they appeal to a modern palate, and dietary concerns and food safety. As last time, I will stop after each section. If you want to ask questions, you can also come off mute and ask me questions as we go along. So, typical anatomy of an SCA feast. Scadian diners have gotten used to a particular way that feasts will be served. So they expect a predictable progression of dishes, which does not necessarily follow the medieval or Renaissance practice. So we are the manner in which we are serving courses or removes, whatever you want to call them, is not consistent with period practice. For example, Scapi, the example I keep using here from the 2018 St. Andrews event, talks about having like the cupboard, the sideboard. They have a selection of like regular stable type foods, bread and fruit and stuff like that on the sideboard, and then they have like more fancy cooked dishes that come out on a regular cadence. However, in the SCA, people expect things in a certain way. So usually first course, bread, butter, salad, or soup. Second course, something like chicken, a starch, a vegetable. Why did I go to fifth? Why did I go straight to fifth? I guess I pulled some bullet points out of that. But then like you'll have a third course. Oh, here we go. Optional third course, something like pork, starch, vegetable. Fourth course, beef, starch, vegetable. For a really fancy Royal Progress event, you might have that many courses or removes because the portions get smaller and smaller as you get towards the end, right? So you start with a lot of bread, butter, salad, and soup. People are very hungry. They eat a whole bunch of that, and then you can give them progressively smaller servings of more expensive things. The order of these is subject to change. Like I said, they include different proteins, sometimes goat, lamb, fish, shellfish, and other meats. When I first started cooking, I was told people don't want to eat fish, people don't want to eat shellfish. Don't make those things. And I think we've proven that that's not the case. People are open, people are more adventurous eaters than we perhaps give them credit for. We do still need to provide plenty of regular staples so nobody is really hungry. If you total this all up, the whole outline of 5 courses, it's 16 complete dishes, and each of those has components like a garnish, a sauce, some kind of preparation or presentation, and then you need to research, test, and decide on a recipe for each component. Like I said, provide familiar foods for the bulk of the meal, and serve little tasting portions of unusual delicacies for the more adventurous eaters. Your goal is so that people have a good time, they enjoy your food, they don't walk away feeling hungry like they need to go to the diner or hit up McDonald's on their drive home. That would be truly sad. Where do you find sources for recipes? So there's a difference between primary sources, translations, redactions, and period plausible, and those go from like most authentic to like least authentic. Primary sources is you are looking at the Scapi manuscript in the original medieval Italian and you're translating it yourself and trying to make sense of the recipes. There are now some very excellent translations of a number of the historical manuscripts, like the Opera of Bartolomeo Scapi. The book is several inches thick. I have the physical copy, and I also have bought the Kindle edition so that I could copy and paste out of it from the Kindle book to make printouts to take to workshops. So that's a translation. That's a straight, that's not interpreting like what do they mean when they say, I can't even think of a phrase, like something that doesn't really make sense until you kind of think about it more deeply. Redactions is when somebody has already looked at the source material or the translation and they're like, I think this means we're making a shortbread crust and we're putting like, a combination of squab meat and, breadcrumbs in this pie. somebody looked at the recipe and said, this is what I think they meant, and they're providing their redaction. Redactions is kind of what we did for the SCA workshops. We looked at the translation from Scully, who's the guy who did the translation, and we tried to look at the ratios of the ingredients, because spoiler alert, it's not like, take two teaspoonsful of vanilla and a half a cup of cream and roll out a shortbread. No, it's not at all like that. You have to look at, this is why we did workshops. So we were trying to interpret what they meant based on what we knew. That's redactions. And then period plausible is, they had all these ingredients at this time in this location. It's plausible that maybe they put them together in this way and, serve that as a historical dish. There is a link here to a most excellent article from Mistress Hellwise, which is, are you cooking dinner or are you serving feast? If you're cooking dinner, you might provide a bunch of period plausible or other people's redactions. You may be mixing and matching time periods and locations just to make something that people will enjoy. I am a nerd about this, and I like to approach, cooking for the event as just as much of an ANS project as, anything else in the area, right? Like, yes, so you're paying for me to do an ANS project when you're sitting for my feast. We put time into developing the recipes and testing them and stuff like that. And I'm trying to present something to you that's pretty close to what might have been served in period. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody has to do that. Not every event warrants that level of research and involvement. We had Arrows, X's, and Nails last summer, and we did a Hobbit themed day board. Because it was a fun event. It was light. It was a picnic. It was all outdoors. That's very different from sitting down for the investiture dinner for the new, coronet for the barony. Look at what's appropriate. You can start online. You can go to the SCA Cooks Facebook. There's some links. Stefan's Floraligium, Good Cookery. I think this one was actually just recently relocated. Yeah, go back. And you're not alone. You are not, isolated in a silo by yourself trying to figure this out. Ask other cooks for suggestions on books you can borrow, check out at the library, look for online. I have a whole library of, I'm pointing like this, like you can see, I have a whole library of cookbooks that I'd be happy to sit down with you and, flip through and try to help you figure out where you might want to source things from. Engage in discussions online. Learn more about period ingredients, sources, techniques. Take Schola classes like this one. Tons of classes are online now. Pensick University last year had an online Pensick University. Like I said, start with books, sites, articles that already have translations, author-provided redactions, and build it up from there. You don't have to translate your own recipe the first time out. And this barely scratches the surface of the narrow focused research you can do about food. I mean, you can pick one recipe from SCA and spend endless amounts of time trying to get it exactly right. Some recipe basics. You may be surprised to learn that spices were not used to cover up the taste of rotten food. Rotten food is still rotten food, and people in period didn't eat it. Religion had a huge impact on dining habits of people in the SC period. There's Lenten dishes. There's an Ember Day tart, or tart for Ember Days, which is a very specific type. They are only cooking on the embers. They're not cooking on a full fire. The Pope said no meat on Fridays, so Lenten meals. There are a limited number of extant cookbooks, and precise measurements are almost never provided. But more research is coming all the time. And the cookbooks from period were written by master cooks for cooks. So it's assumed that you were familiar with the vessels, the techniques, and you knew to add salt and pepper to all the dishes. They just assumed you knew how to season the dish. That's why you may taste something that is, a period recreation, and you're like, this is gross. Why, it doesn't have any taste, or, this taste is too prominent. And the common understanding now is that the spices had to travel from far away, and they got less potent over time. They didn't have Tupperware in period. They had like clay jars with wax seals on them, and that's what the cloves and allspice and nutmeg and saffron and everything was in. And as they travel along the space road, they get less and less potent, which is why if you look at a period recipe and, Scappi's like, use 2 ounces of cinnamon, you're like, that's a lot of cinnamon. It was not nearly as potent in period as it is now. That's why you test the recipes and you adjust them. Yeah, so you need less for the same effect using modern products. Fruits and vegetables did not necessarily taste or look the same in period. They just didn't. Modern farming techniques have produced beautiful produce, but that is, bigger, juicier, brighter. Oranges in period were like all sour. They were more like lemons than oranges. And ingredients that were commonplace in medieval and Renaissance times have gone completely extinct. There is a Roman herb that they just ate it to extinction, and we're not totally sure what it tastes like anymore. So those things are just lost. How to make food that people will enjoy. So like I said, each workshop leading up to the event, we focused on one aspect, like dayboard foods, vegetable dishes, specific turkey preparations. I pulled out the recipes related to that component and then, brought them to the workshop with the ingredients to experiment with. Many dishes we tried in workshops were eliminated because of taste, smell, or texture, or the ingredients were too bizarre to procure and no one would eat it. Since the source material had inconsistent measurements, if any at all, we had to experiment. This is this point. Seasoned cooks are at an advantage here. You can quickly infer, if you cook a lot and you're familiar with ratios and like stuff like that, you'll quickly infer things about the dishes that are not actually in the text, or you may recognize the ingredients to a dish that has a modern equivalent, such as the shortbread that was used for the squab pies for that event. Monkey took a look at the recipe and was like, that's shortbread. I'm like, are you sure? And she was like, yeah, that's shortbread. Let's use a shortbread recipe. And we used that and made it, and that's how it came out. And people liked it. The chicken dessert. I hope you cringe with horror when I say the chicken dessert. So we followed the recipe for a rice and chicken dish in the opera, and it was, how do I write, too sweet and confusing for even our adventurous workshop participants. So it was totally scrapped. It was like rice pudding with chicken in it and way too much cinnamon. So we scrapped it. Scotty wrote in a time where refined sugar was new and extremely popular, so we find it in all kinds of unexpected places. So there was cinnamon and sugar in the chicken tortellini. We had to tinker with the ratios. Like, we started with, okay, this is it as it's written. It's way too sweet. It's way too much. It's way too cinnamony. And we iterated it a few times until it was something that was appealing to modern diners. And that's why it's essential to test and refine your recipes ahead of time, even if you're using someone else's redaction and you want to really squint at some redactions, because, depending on the author, they'll be like, oh, I think that these 2 ingredients that are hard to get could easily be replaced by vinegar, or something like that. They make modern substitutions that don't necessarily always make sense. Dietary concerns and food safety. You want to advertise your menu ahead of time before the pre-reg deadline ends, so people will know if they're able and want to eat at your event. If you have someone who, just can't eat anything, they're vegan, they can't eat, garlic or onion, they can't eat pork, they have to be able to know that, like, look at your menu and say, it's worth it for me to get on board for Feast or not. And then if you're advertising that something is, and you want to mark your recipe up, mark your menu up, saying this is gluten-free, or, this contains nuts, or this contains, some other common allergen. Do food safety and contamination, avoid cross-contamination, so people know if you're preparing foods with allergens in your kitchen. If somebody has a severe nut allergy and you're making almond paste for something, they may choose not to eat your food for their own safety. Label your dishes with the ingredients, some common allergies, nuts, gluten, dairy, soy, dietary restrictions, vegetarian, vegan, kosher. The way that I like to approach this is, here's my menu, here's what I'm serving. ask me questions about it beforehand. If you tell me beforehand, like I'm I see Fiona's cat attending. If you tell me beforehand that you need something special, I can probably accommodate it. If somebody if a diner shows up or an attendee shows up on the day of the event making pretty strict demands, I'll tell them, I'm sorry, I can't accommodate you. You know, if I can, I will. I'm not going to kill myself though to make something last minute for somebody who shows up day of and they're like, I can't eat any of this. What are you making special for me? Let me click on this draft menu and see what I wrote here. Okay, yeah, I can share this. Boom. Yeah, that was a lot. Thank you, Google. So this was the draft menu. We put this out on October 4th. The event was on November 10th in 2018. Recipes marked with an asterisk were redacted from that source. You'll see all these lovely asterisks all over. These were recipes we worked out in workshop, you know, and then what people expect: fresh fruit, some salami, cheese cubes, bread and butter. And we tell people that we bought it, we purchased it. It came in a closed container. Like I said, bread and butter, salad. You can read a whole awesome article about fennel on my eatkingdom.org blog site. The second remove, like I said in the last session, we did a workshop and we just made 300 tortellini stuffed with chicken and cheese and sugar and spice. Turkey, peas, rice, fourth remove, fifth remove. And then it's our intention to publish and distribute a finalized printed copy of the menu and the whole cookbook that we came up with as a result of all the work we did in the event. So we put this out a little more than a month ahead of the event so people could decide, you know, can I eat at this event? I didn't mark the rest of these with, you know, vegan, or like we marked the pumpkin soup specifically as vegan, vegetarian. And like I said, eggs with stuffing, way better than eggs, just regular hard-boiled eggs. What's next? Where and how to shop for ingredients. Do comparison shopping. I'm going to tell you, where did I put it? Like at the bottom. It is tempting to go on a shopping spree at Restaurant Depot. Resist that urge, because focus on the ingredients that you can only get there in appropriate quantities. A gross of eggs sounds like a great idea until you actually have a gross of eggs and only need about half that many for your event. And then you're like, what do I do with 6 dozen uncooked, you know, regular eggs? Resist. It doesn't make sense. It's difficult to see what Restaurant Depot has online. You need a reconnaissance mission to go do your price comparisons at RD. I use Sam's Club, Costco, other big box stores. We're now living in the world where you can, you know, for Sam's Club, we happen to have one close by. You can do a pre-pick and pickup order. They will do all the shopping for you. You show up, you show them a receipt, you put the stuff in your car. You're not wandering around the store for an hour. Keep in mind specialty markets like H Mart, the Halal Market. Order stuff from Amazon. I wound up ordering almond paste from Amazon. It was just easier to buy it that way than to look for it in the store. Like I said, H Mart and Halal markets will have spices that you can't get in your regular market. And then supermarkets, you know, ShopRite, Instacart, Shipped, easier than ever to compare prices online, curbside pickup, or even delivery. I think for St. Andrews, I put in an Instacart or I put in a Stop and Shop Peapod order and ordered like a dozen heads of fennel. I may have gotten all the fennel available in Suffolk County from Peapod. It might have been 20, but I don't remember. It was a lot. It was a lot of fennel. And if you happen to be fortunate enough to have a local butcher shop, farmer's market, or farm stand, so a lot of times if you go to the local butcher and you're like, I need a dozen chickens between this weight and that weight, they can order them for you, and some of them will even, if you ask them, butcher them for you. Your equipment. You should have a personal cooking kit that travels with you. You're going to want personal knives, a 6 to 8 inch chef's knife, paring knife, bread knife, boning, cleaver. You want it, and I have this. I buy these randomly on, like, you know, deal a day sites and stuff. or if I see them in, Sam's or Costco, like cheap, inexpensive knives that you feel okay sharing with people who don't have their own. So if somebody shows up at your door and is like, hi, I'm here, I can, peel carrots and chop celery for the next 2 hours, but I don't have any of my own equipment, you don't want to hand them your personal expensive knife that you love with your life. You want to hand them something functional, but that if you lose it or they chip it, it's not the end of the world. You're going to want to bring, peelers, juicers, egg separator is nice to have, and sanitation, wear an apron, hair ties, hair nets, masks, gloves. And while you're testing the recipes, you will discover what other tools you need to bring. If you need to bring a rolling pin or, a really big bowl to mix something in that may not be available at the site. So take note of the tools that you're using while you're developing the menu. And then understand what's available at the site and what you need to bring in. I wrote it in red at the bottom. What kind of stoves or ovens are available? Friedrich shared with us at the end of the last session, he got on site for a big event and one of the 2 ovens was simply kaput. It was not available that day. How do you adjust to that? I happen to know the capacity of the facility at the site that we use all the time. And we've brought in some local members have really tremendous gas grills that we could, we did leg of lamb. So we wrapped all the leg of lamb in foil and put it outside and put it on the grill for low and slow for hours. But that was outside the kitchen. It wasn't on the stove. It wasn't, in the ovens. Cleaning supplies. Will you clean up? This is so important. Will you clean up your own kitchen or is there a crew for that on the event staff? You want to work that out with the event steward beforehand because you've been cooking all day. You're exhausted. You've done your part of the event and now you need to know that somebody else is coming in to do the final cleanup. You should be cleaning and putting things away all day long. Don't just leave it all to the end. But you do need that one last, big push at the end. And is there adequate refrigeration or do you need to get creative and bring in coolers? We had to store squab. We had to store squab and quail and little birds in gigantic coolers because they were bought 4 days before the event and we couldn't put them in the fridge right away. That's just understand what's available at the site and what you need to bring in, especially pots, pans, serving platters, utensils. Just know what you're getting into. Menu planning and development. Questions, comments? Let me see if I can look at my PowerPoint and see what comes next.
Because I know we've got a bunch of Usgard cooks here.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about knives to hand out to people. For those people who are planning to cook for the first time in Usgard, there is a lot of kitchen gear. It is in a couple of locations. And if you're considering doing an event, one of the things you should do is talk to the seneschal who's here and or the vice regents and arrange to go to the storage facility, pull the stuff out and take a look at it. We've got food service knives, very nice food service knives. So they're there, but if you don't know that they're there and don't arrange to get them brought to your site. So,
Exactly.
And I assume An Dubh has the same situation, yes?
We have serving platters. So we have bowls and serving platters and, pitchers and, big plates and small plates and metal stuff. But in terms of actual pots, pans, cookware, we don't really have that stuff. We tend to bring that in ourselves. Or the Estonia house has most of it. We're spoiled in that regard. They have really gigantic cooking pots and frying pans and cookie sheets and stuff like that to use. That's why it's also really important to tour the site and see what's available to you before you get there. And we have a similar situation. You have to talk to the Chamberlain, which for us is John Xavier. He managed, we have a whole trailer that we haul around from site to site that has this all in it. But if you're not going to haul the trailer and you just need the serving stuff, you can drive out to where the trailer is stored and load it into your car and clean it. We do have stuff like tablecloths. We have kitchen towels, which we're not putting those back in the storage unit. Somebody from the kitchen or the event takes them home, washes them all, and brings them back to the next event on the linens and stuff like that. And I have a whole backpack that I just, this is my kitchen gear. this knife roll has things in it that only I can touch. This knife roll has things I can loan to people. I get like the Cuisinart like full color with the little edge guards on them because they're bright. And if you see a giant, you see a bright green knife sitting on the table, I'm like, oh yeah, that's mine. I'll take that home.
Yeah.
It's harder for people to misplace them. Okay.
One of the things you may want to consider is if the barony has money in their budget, you may want to consider putting in a proposal to add additional gear to the barony. So in the event you're not at Estonia House, you're at a different site, you can be much more adaptable.
Yep, that's a good point. So I'm looking through my slides. I think that might be it. Yeah, that's the end of this